Welcome to New York Nonprofit Media. My name is Jeff Stein, and I'm here in the CEO corner with Suzanne Nossel, the Executive Director of PEN America, one of the most prominent literary membership organizations in the world. Obviously, very well known for awarding both prominent authors and emerging authors, but also a lot of work around free expression and advocacy surrounding that, both here in the US and abroad. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I was hoping that we could start off with just a little bit of history about the organization and how it has evolved from really just focusing mostly on the literary community, evolving into more advocacy, and how the organization has changed as the mission has sort of evolved over the years.
Yeah, sure. Well, PEN goes back almost 100 years. It was founded after World War I by a group of writers in Europe who felt writers had a role to play in preventing future wars, and that it was important to kind of create a literary community and sense of fellowship that would transcend borders and enable dialogue in situations where the conversation between governments broke down. And so that was the genesis of it. And for a long time, it was really a volunteer organization of writers with no paid staff. The first paid staff in the United States came a few decades ago, but for a long time, it was really very much a kind of grassroots, seat of your pants kind of organization. Then over the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, it's become more like a professionalized NGO where the writers are still very much at the heart and soul of what we do, and we serve them and engage them and try to mobilize their voices. But when I came in a few years ago, my background was, I would say, more on the human rights side of PEN than strictly the literary side, although I'm a big reader and lover of literature. So I saw an opportunity for PEN to really raise its voice and visibility in some of the pressing free expression challenges of our day, both here in the United States and around the world. I think PEN has a very unique perspective. I think of writers as sort of the Uber users of free expression because it's so integral to their livelihood and their craft, and they really kind of live and breathe it. And so they speak with a special authority, whether it's on issues of national surveillance, NSA surveillance and its impact on creativity, which is an issue that we've taken on. We've looked at the gaps in protection for national security whistleblowers and how that undercuts national security journalists' ability to cover the issues and expose what's going on. We've taken on Chinese censorship in a major way and done a lot of work on China and on Myanmar, on Egypt, on Turkey, and many parts of the world, and I think brought a kind of unique perspective to it.
Right. I was hoping to sort of delve into what I think is kind of a core question about the mission, about free expression, is striking a balance between defending free expression and promoting responsible free speech. Obviously the organization really notably got a lot of flack over honoring the Charlie Hebdo authors. I think the award was called the Freedom of Expression Courage Award, and some very famous authors walked out or didn't attend a gala over that. Where do you think that line is between defending free expression and making sure that free speech is responsible?
Sure. I mean, the way I look at it is that to live in a sort of tolerant, pluralistic, diverse society where things are civil, there's mutual respect, you want 95 or 98% of people to exercise that responsibility and that civility just about all the time. But I wouldn't want to live in a society where 100% of the people did it 100% of the time, because if that were the case, then the boundaries for expression really would be quite narrow, and we would all be living within, a set of real walls about what could and couldn't be talked about. And, mores change, ideas change, and we have to have room for new ideas and concepts and challenges to come into the discourse. And what we looked at Charlie Hebdo as doing is sort of patrolling those outer precincts of free expression, a place where most of us don't want to tread, because you know what? It can be offensive. It can upset people. It's not welcome. It can be interpreted the wrong way. But they were willing to go there, and even at great personal risk and peril. And When we looked at it, we were quite clear that what they were engaging in was not hate speech. It was mockery and satire directed in 100 different directions, including at Islam. And that was the most sort of incendiary of it. But they were, I believe, an equal opportunity offender. They took on religious Jews. They took on the French government, the French right wing. And when you talk to people who really understand French and French culture and satire and the language, it fits into a long tradition of French satire, and almost inevitably, the target they were skewering was not the member of the religious minority, but rather those entrenched extremists, the right wing, and their ostracization of minorities. So it was important to understand the true nature of what they were doing, and also to defend their right to sort of go to those outer limits and take some of the risks that the rest of us, I think, rightly refrain from.
Mm-hmm. Does the organization or you personally sort of worry about a double standard of free expression? Maybe defending, defense for Charlie Hebdo, but not defense for maybe like the BDS movement, or which has seen a lot of legislation across the globe, regardless of whether or not you agree with their tactics or their message. Do you think that that curtailing that speech is more accepted in the West than curtailing, say, Charlie Hebdo?
Yeah, that is something that we look at. We're doing a report right now looking at issues of campus speech. And that's been one of the very divisive issues on campus. There have been others, issues of race, misogyny.
Right.
And questions of, what makes for a respectful community, and should a campus, have parameters over what can and can't be said, and, what belongs on the inside and what belongs on the outside. And so we're taking a look at that and trying to set out a way that minority views and identities can be respected and embraced, but alongside freedom of expression. We don't think that they should come or need to come at the expense of one another. All kinds of movements, whether it's for racial equality or gender equality or movements having to do with issues overseas, they all depend on free expression to be able to organize and thrive and get their voice and message out. And we try to be neutral when it comes to those viewpoints, understanding that different speech can be interpreted in different ways. Some speech can make people feel isolated, vulnerable, marginalized, even threatened. And I think that has to be understood and appreciated. I don't think you can sweep that aside, but I think you can address those concerns in a way that is consistent with upholding free speech principles. So that's what we try to do.
Right. At your most recent gala this past week, J.K. Rowling made some headlines saying that Donald Trump's speech, while objectionable and bigoted, should be defended. His right to exercise that speech should be defended. What role do you think the news media is playing in free speech right now? Do you think that Donald Trump's speech should be modified, curtailed at all, given the content of it?
Well, I think we can all acknowledge, and for me personally, it is offensive. I agree with her, though, that his right to, the way she put it, I think was very important. She said, I will stand up for his right to offend me because that upholds my own right to call him out. And I think that's the sort of two sides of the coin that you have to say, that if it's just free speech for those you agree with, that's not really free speech. And kind of going out on a limb and being willing to defend those who are offensive, bigoted, who victimize others, it's difficult to do because you may be construed as sympathizing with them, willing to stand with them, respecting or agreeing with those points of view. So I think it's very important for us, those of us in the free speech community, to kind of stand together and be willing to stand up for unpalatable forms of speech, because otherwise what we'll see is the zone of free speech for all of us is going to shrink, and that's something that we want to avoid. So I think it's also a question, as you look at these issues of understanding, what is Penn's role? We're a free speech organization. So if I were in a different position, my focus might be calling out Donald Trump for the things he said about Muslims or about women, about all kinds of other groups that I think are really very troubling and objectionable. But as the leader of a free speech organization, I have to put the emphasis in playing our role on his right to say those things.
Right. As a final question, how has managing the organization changed as it's encompassed more and more advocacy campaigns that vary from LGBT expression to NSA surveillance? What does the managerial side of the organization look like?
Well, we've grown, and so we've added certain new functions. For example, when I came in, we didn't have a communications person, and to carry out advocacy campaigns, that's pretty essential. So we've been able to add that. We've built up our social media followings. We've added capacity to do more public programs. We do over 100 different programs every year, including our signature, the Penn World Voices Festival. So we've stepped that up. So it's kind of just more to take on, more to manage. It's a very tight-knit team, a very hard-working team, people very committed to our mission. And some people sort of sometimes think, the literature and the free expression, how do they go together? But I think as we live it, they're very much intertwined, and it's sort of the literary excellence in some ways that gives us the authority. The excellence of our members gives us the authority to speak out, with them on our sides and with their stature as sort of the foundation for our credibility.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more about your future campaigns, and thanks so much for coming in to speak with us.
Thanks for having me.